this it for Gus Malzahn on the Plains? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love. And we are previewing teams in the SEC. We have marched through 5 teams in the ACC. We're just going to hit the contenders and possibly get back to the other teams here in the next few weeks. In the SEC, we've looked at Texas A&M, LSU, and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Auburn. For the first time since 2006, there were no coaches fired in the SEC during the offseason. That may happen again this offseason if you go through each coaching situation in the SEC. Either they have a really good team or the expectations are low because the coach is new and the program is being rebuilt, i.e. Arkansas, for example, except for the expectations at Auburn, coming off a 3-5 season in the SEC, 8-5 overall. So the trajectory at Auburn is a mystery to a certain extent. Gus Malzahn has had an odd run there on the Plains in that he took over a team that went 0-8 in the SEC, 3-9, and he took them within 7 seconds of winning the national championship. So they win the SEC, they go to the national championship game. Then that standard was set to a certain extent, and they were expected, ranked in the top 5 to 10 in the nation a couple years past that, but they continued to underachieve with 4-5 loss seasons until 2017, when despite 2 losses early in the season, they knocked off 2 number 1 teams in November, Georgia and Alabama, and put themselves in a position to get to the college football playoff with 2 losses. But they blew it. So that season had a disappointing finish to it with losses against Georgia and UCF, and then 3-5 last year, losing to Tennessee, even though they finished off with a big win against Purdue in whatever bowl game that was, the Outback Bowl, and finished at 8-5. So the Auburn run for the past 4 years under Gus Malzahn has been 7-6, 2-6 in the SEC. That was an awful year in which they won the Birmingham Bowl against Memphis. That would have been in 2016. 8-5, 5-3, another subpar season. Auburn is a top 15 program. They should be finishing in the top 15 in the nation. So consider 7-6, 8-5, 10-4, 8-5. And also in the SEC, 17-15 the past 4 years, 2-6, 5-3, 7-1, 3-5. That just does not match the recruiting rankings, which have been number 5 in the SEC, but number 9 in the country in 2016. Then the next year, number 4 in the SEC, number 9 in the country. Then number 3 in the SEC, number 12 in the nation. Then number 6 in the SEC, but still number 11 in the country from this 2019 class that will be on the field this fall. And then projecting toward the future in 2020, right now they've got the 6th rated class in the SEC, but it's number 12 in the country. So they basically have a fringe top 10 class over the past 5 seasons, and they're producing 8-5, 10-4, 8-5, 7-6. So that doesn't add up. So the trajectory, they really had the one good win last year against Texas A&M. Otherwise, they got blasted by Alabama. They lost to LSU. They lost to a bad Tennessee team. 5 losses in the SEC. They did beat Washington on the opening weekend. So Gus Malzahn, now in his 7th season, has had this weird tenure again, the huge 2013, and then disappointment other than a 3-week span in November of 2017 in which they beat Georgia and Alabama to set themselves up to compete for the SEC championship in the rematch against Georgia. So they've had 1 season and a stretch of 2 games in which they got to the brink of a college football playoff. Otherwise, they've not matched the recruiting rankings. The recruiting has been decent. It's been what it should be at Auburn. All right, Gus Malzahn takes back the offense. He's going to call the plays this year. This offense was only 79th in the country in total offense, and that was with a stable quarterback situation with Jarrett Stidham. Now, could they get better at quarterback or not as good at quarterback? Because they had the known factor in Stidham. Now they've got 2 very inexperienced players in Joey Gatewood and Bo Nix vying for the job. We don't know who's going to win the job. but they're two mobile quarterbacks, and that's what Gus Malzahn likes. That's what produced the best Auburn offenses with Nick Marshall running the show. Even though he couldn't throw the ball downfield consistently, they could really run it with a mobile quarterback. So that's what they're going to have with either Gatewood or Nix. And, of course, the guy that could throw and run was Cam Newton, with Gus Malzahn running the offense in 2010. All right, the offensive line wasn't very good last year, but they do have all 5 starters back. And the running back position's deep. It wasn't very effective last year. Of course, Boobie Whitlow was the guy that gained most of the yardage at 787 yards. Sean Shivers, you've got Cam Martin. They're the 2 veterans coming back, and a couple rookies, a couple freshmen could vie for playing time in DJ Williams and also Mark Anthony Richards. Auburn's loaded at wide receiver. I don't know that they've got a true number 1 guy, but they have depth and super athletes here with Seth Williams, who caught 26 passes and 5 touchdowns, and a complete burner in Anthony Schwartz. Unfortunately, just hours before I'm recording this, Schwartz broke a foot in practice. I have not heard the prognosis there, but he could be out for quite some time. Will Hastings and Eli Stove were 2 guys that were out last year, but they're back and they've been productive in the past. So Auburn is loaded at wide receiver, but they certainly lose an extra gear with Anthony Schwartz missing, and he was also a guy that they would hand the ball to in the jet sweep. All right, defensively, this is a team that's got an elite front 4. Derek Brown's a player that when I look at his stat line of 10.5 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks, I can't believe that he didn't do more than that on the stat sheet. And just watching the kid play, he's a future NFL talent. Marlon Davidson's a great player. And also Nick Coe on the edge with 13.5 tackles for loss and 7 sacks is a force. In addition to those guys that are known factors, top-level SEC talent, they have 4 4-stars coming in just on the defensive front from the 2019 class. They've got all new linebackers. All the linebackers are gone. The one guy that's really intriguing is 5-star Owen Papo. All right, they've got spots left up for grabs at cornerback. Auburn's been a bit deficient in the secondary in recent years. Christian Tutt's a good player. Javaris Davis had 41 tackles and 8 pass breakups last year. Noah Igbenjini, 50 total tackles and 11 pass breakups. And until I watch Auburn play again, and that's going to be in the opener against Oregon, will I remember how to pronounce that young man's name? But he's a good player. He had 50 tackles last year. Jeremiah Dinson and Daniel Thomas combined for, do the math, Mark, 138 total tackles last year. They're one of the top safety duos in the SEC, Thomas and Dinson. The place kicker needs to get better. It's not Daniel Carlson. It's his brother, Anders Carlson. He missed 10 kicks, 15 of 25. The schedule is the same schedule that everyone has in the SEC Western Division, in that it's rugged. You've got to play all the top teams in the SEC West. What is the draw in the SEC East? And for Auburn, they get the most difficult possible draw. They get Georgia and Florida, the 2 best teams in the East. And then on top of it, they play an Oregon team that brings in NFL quarterback to be Justin Herbert. So it's a tough go for Auburn. We had a projection in the spring for 8-4 for the Auburn Tigers. We're going to relook at that situation once we get a little bit deeper into fall practice, and we've got our prognostications coming up with a big special coming up in the next few weeks. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will see you with another preview very soon.